An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe.
That's President Harry Truman on August 6, 1945, announcing that America had dropped a nuclear bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Some of the main people involved in that decision are now the subject of a new book titled Road to Surrender: 3 Men and the Countdown to the End of World War II. With us now, the book's author, former Washington bureau chief at Newsweek, and just a great historian, Evan Thomas. Evan, you know, what's so fascinating is that you talk about the 3 men who were central to this decision. The guy we just saw speaking, not really one of them. FDR kept him in the dark.
He did. Amazingly, the president didn't tell the vice president that we had an atom bomb, that we were going to have to drop it. You know, Truman was ultimately the decider, but much of the decision was done by other men. And I was just fascinated. What was it like for these men who had to do this terrible thing? And so I began reading diaries, and I read the diary of Henry Stimson, who was our Secretary of War. And, you know, he referred to the bomb by the code name S1 and by the British code name tube alloys. But in his diary, he also called it the terrible, the awful, the diabolical. And on the morning that he showed Harry Truman the photographs of what Hiroshima looked like after the bomb, which is like the inside of an ashtray, just ashes, Henry Stimson had a heart attack. I don't think that was a coincidence. They agonized over this. But the problem was the Japanese were just not surrendering. I started reading diaries on the other side, how the Japanese were reacting, and here's a scene for you. On 3 days after they dropped the Hiroshima bomb, the Supreme War Council in Japan is meeting, and they get word that another Hiroshima-sized bomb has just dropped on Nagasaki. So what happens? The war minister there, Anami, says, well, wouldn't it be beautiful for the whole country to die like flowers? He compared to Japan to a shattered jewel. They just were not going to give up.
They weren't going to give up. You know, it's interesting about Truman focusing on his decision. What I found when I was studying and writing about Truman was he was surrounded by great men. He was surrounded by George Marshall, Dean Acheson, Averell Harriman, others. And he followed their advice for the most part, other than Israel. He had great thinkers around him, and he followed their advice. That's sort of what happened here, too, isn't it?
It is. You know, this is but on the night that Truman gave the order to bomb Hiroshima, he wrote in his diary, I have instructed the Secretary of War, and he agrees with me, that we are going to bomb a purely military target, that the bomb will be aimed at soldiers and sailors, not women and children. Well, that just wasn't true. The aim point in Hiroshima was a bridge right in the middle of the city. They did kill 10,000 soldiers, but they instantly killed 60,000 civilians, including, of course, many women and children. So, you know, what is he thinking? There's an element of denial in all this, and people just not wanting to look at what they're actually doing. I understand it. Can you imagine the pressure on them? But it's, you know, we like to think men sit in a room or women sit in a room today and they clearly work out what's going to happen. It just doesn't work that way. When they're making these kind of decisions, it's hard because they know they're up against an enemy that just won't quit.
It was a hellish decision and killed so many civilians, killed so many children, killed so many mothers, so many people. And yet, here we are all these years later. Most historians, along with you, have concluded that it actually saved so many lives, countless Asian lives, especially. Yeah. You say we're not exactly sure. We'd always heard, oh, this is going to save 1 million U.S. troops from going into that all-out invasion. We're not really sure of that, but we are certain that so many more Asians would have died, Japanese would have died, if they had not dropped the bomb and forced Japan surrender then before an all-out assault and invasion on the island.
They had to choose between horrible things. If they don't drop these bombs, we'd have to invade. We would have to invade. That could kill up to 1 million Americans. There was debate amongst the services. The Navy did not want to participate in the invasion because of kamikazes. It had 2,000 kamikazes at Okinawa. The Japanese had 7,000 kamikazes in caves waiting for us, along with 1 million troops. So you can see why we didn't want to invade. Probably, in the end, we wouldn't have. Instead, we would have starved Japan. We would have strangled and starved them. The bombs perversely, and this is perverse, saved millions of Japanese people. And as you mentioned, millions of Asians. The Japanese were brutally occupying Asia. 250,000 people were dying every month. By ending the war, finally the American ships came in and brought them food. You know, these things are always clearer in retrospect. But at the time, it wasn't clear what was going to happen. Of course they don't know. Oppenheimer, the guy who designed the bomb, said, well, you know, it might kill 20,000 people. Well, it killed 70,000 people. 70,000 instantly. It killed another 70,000 slowly, dying from radiation poisoning. Nagasaki, fortunately, the bomb missed. The mission was screwed up. The plane missed its initial target, was running out of gas, dropped its bomb a mile off target. And, you know, interesting, one of the characters I wrote about, Tui Spotts, who was the general overseeing the bombing of Japan, he was glad that the Nagasaki bomb was off target. Why? Because it didn't kill as many people. It killed a mere 35,000 instead of 70,000. Spotts wrote in his own diary, this has never been revealed before, this is a private diary, that he was against the bomb. This is the guy who's ordered to drop it, because as he had always been against dropping, he had been head of our bombing in Europe, where we had to kill thousands of civilians. He said, I always opposed it there, too, but if it's going to save lives, okay. He never quite recovered from it. His granddaughter, told me that he couldn't sleep. He would slowly moan. He confessed to her at the end of his life that he felt guilty about the bomb. Of course he did, but he had to do it.
My God. The new book is entitled Road to Surrender: 3 Men and the Countdown to the End of World War II. Evan Thomas, thank you very much.